Like many of the weekly themes for the Aquarian series, the theme today, eternity and time, is a timeless one. It is one of those penultimate themes which seems to have perplexed and inspired some of the most brilliant thinkers, poets, spiritual seekers, and mystics of every tradition. And it points to central mysteries of spiritual philosophy, mythology, and religion, and seems to present one of the key challenges also of the Bodhisattva path, the quest by which divine knowledge is embodied for the sake of service to humanity. And the questions it brings to mind are both cosmic and human, both metaphysical and ethical. Metaphysically, if it is true, as many great teachers have said, that the spiritual essence of life is unitary and eternal, how is it that everything we see or experience in the empirical world of the senses is in a constant state of flux, ever in motion, never the same, as HPB says, for the billionth part of a second? How is it possible, as the theme suggests, for that which is ephemeral and time-bound to reflect or mirror that which is timeless? Or put another way, in what sense could we meaningfully agree with William Blake when he said that time is the moving image of eternity? And this line of questioning is related to many metapsychological questions. If each human being is indeed a microcosm, potentially mirroring the whole, divine in essence, though cyclic and ephemeral in body, what sort of self-transformative knowledge is needed in order to reflect that reality? What does it mean to be both beyond time, one with the universal and immortal self of all, what the voice of the silence calls the pure, bright essence of Alaya, while also being in time, a temporary personality, a name and form, seemingly bound to all the relentless finalities of incarnation? Fortunately, without traveling to the hidden cave sanctuaries of the Far East, to the mystery temples of India or Tibet, as HPB did, the spiritual seeker of the Aquarian age has the great boon of rich literary traditions by which we can begin to at least approach the threshold of such questions. So as we know, the theosophical system is not one arrived at through the observation of physical nature, of telescopes and microscopes, nor through speculation and conjecture. Instead, Blavatsky wrote, the underlying laws and truths of nature, known as theosophia, are derived from an uninterrupted record covering thousands of generations of seers, each of whom have so perfected their moral, mental, and spiritual nature that they are no longer hindered by the barriers of time and space to which most human consciousness is captive. Through the path of renunciation, having reawakened what is called the eye of Dhamma, the highest forms of spiritual vision and insight, they have become capable of penetrating all the veils of nature in order to gaze, it said, directly into the soul of things. In addition, the individual experiences of such adepts have been checked and verified in every department of nature by countless other seers belonging to this vast, unbroken lineage, all known to one another and all constituting a single tree of noetic wisdom. Also referred to as the guardian wall, they are said to embody the very wisdom they impart, and therefore constitute themselves a living bridge between the divine and the human, between eternity and time. And therefore, it seems fitting that we should begin a topic such as this by reference to this living source, this living tradition of most of what we'll be presenting today. The Gupta Vidya teaches that any human being who is truly serious about entering the spiritual path pointed to by such beings should, out of purified altruism and concern for suffering humanity, begin to discover, awaken, and activate the otherwise dormant capacities of mind and heart that lie latent within us. And like those training for high altitude mountain climbing, we need to develop the lungs to breathe in rarefied atmospheres, what are called the airy nothings of Akasha. In part, this means developing the capacity to think abstractly, universally, and impersonally. And as challenging as that may seem at first, we're encouraged to establish a center of thought and ideation in that which is formless. This requires not only withdrawing identity from individual name and form, from all the characteristics of our current personality, from our personal history, and even from the current century and culture that we belong to, but from any manifestation whatsoever. Any planet, any solar system, galaxy, or even the entire endless series of manifesting universes. And so in the first shlokas of the stanzas of Dhyan, we're asked to imagine a reality in which all conditionality, all landmarks, limitations, or boundaries of whatever kind are dissolved. Here, even eternal space is slumbering, along with grandfather time itself is asleep in the infinite bosom of duration. In many traditions, we find that that which is truly eternal cannot be reduced to language. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Any term or symbol used will have its limitation and therefore potentially distort the meaning. Even those mystics and sages who have experienced the infinite through purified intuitive faculties, wrote HPB, can no more than other mortals express that state in words. But one thing she repeatedly states is that what may appear to us as utter unconsciousness and darkness is to the sage a realm of absolute light. And to begin preparing the mind for that vision of truth in the archaic secret doctrine, the first image placed before the aspirant is that of a circle. So many of you who were at Elton's talk this afternoon heard a really fine discussion of this. But whether that is a white circle on a black background or a black circle with a gray background may be immaterial, because one is required to dissolve all boundaries, to imagine a circle without circumference, in which there is no background or foreground, no here or there, no beginning or ending, no past or future. And this boundless presence is also symbolized by the trinity of absolute abstract space, absolute abstract motion, and eternal duration. And though it is the special province of today's talk to unfold or attempt to unfold the meaning of duration, one soon finds that that cannot be properly done without reference to the meanings also associated with space and motion, for they, as Elton pointed out, are three in one. The basis, HPB wrote, of all theological trinities. And though conceptually, we distinguish between notions of time and space, Einstein pointed out brilliantly that they are a unified continuum and also relative to the conscious observer. And this has its correlate in theosophical metaphysics. Like abstract space, duration is the boundless container of all notions and subdivisions of time, of all possible universes, and includes both being and non-being. Immovable in its abstraction and uninfluenced by either the presence or absence of an objective universe, it is said to be a unity without division or dimension of any kind, ever present and self-existent. As the Great Mother, the shoreless waters of space, it is inseparable from that absolute compassion which spans all pralayas and binds all manvantras to all other manvantras. It is inseparable from Mula Prakriti, that undifferentiated substance from which all forms of substance and matter in any universe arises. As absolute abstract motion, duration is the root of mind, unconditioned consciousness, a divine plenum greater than countless billions of suns, from which all intelligence, cosmic or human, arises. Nothing depletes or alters duration. As the one source of all photic forces, it is called the great breath, the eternal rhythm, or rita, the logoic heartbeat, which initiates every cosmos, inseparable from all lower forces that are periodically radiated from it. It is the true self, the Krishna Christos. As Krishna said, I am boundless time itself. And it is to this reality and knowledge which it is said we return in union with during cycles of deep dreamless sleep. It also appears to be the central meaning of Kala Chakra, the wheel or circle of boundless time, and of Kalahansa, the swan of eternity. Kala means boundless time. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Kala Chakra teaching was not given out publicly until 1981, when the 14th Dalai Lama first offered the preliminary initiations at the Deer Park in Madison, Wisconsin. But the gist of it seems to have been given in the 1875 cycle and elaborated in the 1975 cycle, and shown to be a teaching that far preceded the historical Buddha. The Adi Buddha of Kala Chakra is the non-dual union of wisdom and method, the primordial Buddha, called by the sutras Vajradhara. Vajradhara, according to HPB, is the first logos, which he called the Lord of all mysteries, and connects with the silent watcher, he who is ever awake, even during the Mahapralaya, and has been awake since beginningless time. In the Buddhist tradition, he is the root essence of all Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and adepts, also called the Great Initiator in the Secret Doctrine, who holds spiritual sway over all initiated adepts throughout the cycle. He is that nameless one who has been given many names, whoever remains at his self-chosen post on the threshold between light and darkness, between the timeless and the time-bound, for the sake of all pilgrim souls who would fain find their way to that region of freedom and light from which he is a voluntary exile. He is also the highest innate gnosis, the root of universal compassion and wisdom encircling and pervading the minds of all sentient beings, transcending, it said, both samsara and nirvana. To everything, there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. The circle, besides being the boundless container of all time, is suggestive of periodic reoccurrence, of reincarnation, and the mastery of the rhythms of the time bound. Though each cycle is unique, each also has a universal archetypal pattern, lending meaning and context to each experience, while also providing endless opportunities for dissolving the illusion of separateness. And this is where it seems the doctrine of the three kayas, or the robes of the Bodhisattva, as given in The Voice of the Silence, comes into focus. The Nirmanakaya robe, as we know, is the capacity to deliberately, willingly, and self-consciously incarnate through cycles without number, it is said, which would be unimaginable without the middle robe called Sambhogakaya, the great and complete knowledge. That is a knowledge of all the differentiated levels leading to and allowing for incarnation. And Dharmakaya, that self-conscious awareness of the true self in boundless duration that we've been trying to discuss. In order to effectively participate in cyclic evolution, to selflessly serve all the kingdoms of sentient life, evolving in the great wheel of samsara, it would seem to be logically necessary for the Bodhisattva to also understand and master each of the vestures and states of consciousness that are subject to cyclic time. And this is also where the teaching regarding the logos and the 12 nidanas, it appears to be of utmost importance. Besides logic and ratio, the Greek word logos, as we know, refers to word, speech, or reason. The esoteric meaning of the word logos is the rendering in objective expression, as in a photograph, of the concealed thought. The logos is the mirror reflecting divine mind, and the universe is the mirror of the logos. In Pythagorean, as in theosophical thought, the logos refers to that ineffable deific radiation, whereby the universal monas, the unmanifested one life, emerges from within the boundless circle to initiate the 3-in-1. And in Transactions on page 106, HPB states it this way very succinctly: the Pythagorean monad descending from no place, loka, shoots like a falling star through the planes of non-being, which are sevenfold, into the first world of being, and gives birth to number 1. Then, branching off to the right, it produces number 2. Turning again to form the baseline, it begets number 3. And thence ascending again to number 1, it finally disappears therefrom into the realms of non-being. This 3-in-1 is the verbum, the word which was in the beginning in the first verses of Genesis and of St. John's Gospel. It is the Hindu Vak, the Egyptian Isis, the Chinese Buddhist Kuan Yin, and the Tibetan Avalokiteshvara. It is the Pranava, the AUM, the divine son of the most revered and ancient of Vedic hymns. It is said to contain in potentia everything that will arise in a given period of evolution. And in humanity, it is that which corresponds to the immortal higher triad, Atma Buddhi Manas, and the innate universality, selfless love, and boundless generosity of the human heart. In stanza 3, this threefold logos is described as emerging pre-cosmically, that is, prior to the dawn of periodic time and space, and coeval with the last vibration of the seventh eternity of the Mahapralaya. In the SD, the length of an entire cosmic period, as given by archaic Brahminical astronomy, is published. And HPB says that this is not the true esoteric calculation, which can only be given through initiation, but that it's sufficient for our current understanding. And based on this number, the period in which the threefold logos emerges from unmanifest to manifest works out to be roughly 44.434286 billion years, quite a bit longer than NASA estimates for the life of the cosmos as a whole. So we find in the stanzas at least three levels of meaning to the word eternity. The first is eternal duration, already spoken of. The second is the 3-in-1 logos, which arises prior to and is eternal throughout a given manvantaric period. And the third is the 7 eternities, explained HPB, the 7 great eons. And it appears we are thus being given the universal archetype of cyclic time. Even in pralaya, the universal mind, though latent, is inseparable from divine law and the divine reality of number. And she says that just as the true esoteric calculation divides every period of manifestation into 7, the same holds true of the periods of non-being, thus sanctifying, she says, the division of the indivisible. And this enormously broadens our understanding of the sacred teaching regarding Kalahansa, the great bird or swan. As she explains in The Voice of the Silence, Kalahansa is both the 7-fold white swan that is in time and the 7-fold black swan that is out of time. The AUM includes and transcends both. Sweet is rest between the wings of that which is not born or dies, but is the Om throughout eternal ages. Kalahansa, she also says in the SD, is the affirmation of human essence with God essence, and a repetition in time of the eternal I am I. Might 7 then be the key to understanding all periodicity. When the dawn of manifestation arises, says the SD, through Fohat, 7 Laya centers emerge from formless latency to active potency. According to Mahatma K.H., 7 is one of the central meanings of the interlaced triangles of the Theosophical Seal. The center point is the 7th and synthesis of the whole, which he designates Avalokiteshvara. These 7 are, as we know, the mysterious Ahi, the highest dhyanis, called Lords of Light, who, as the collective aggregate of divine intelligence and following the plan laid out in the divine mind, become the emanating agents of karmic and cosmic law and of all forms of matter and consciousness in the evolutionary cycle. And their representation is found in many traditions. In Buddhism, they are the 7 Dhyani Buddhas. In Hinduism, the 7 Kumaras. In the Kabbalah, the 7 Sephiroth. And in the Zoroastrian tradition, the 7 Amesha Spentas. They are linked to the 7 stages of creation found in biblical and also Hindu mythologies. And just as the one white light in passing through a triadic prism becomes the 7-fold spectrum, and ultimately the infinite variety of colors and shades in the visible universe, so are these 7 rays of the universal sun said to be the primary and essential means by which the timeless enters time, by which the one becomes many. As above, so below. Every manifested thing mirrors this archetypal 7ing, we're told, and all key cycles are governed by the same fractal pattern. And we see this most readily in our daily experience in the 7 days of the week, which in archaic systems, both East and West, were linked with the 7 sacred planets and 7 deities. This particular image, I don't know if you all can see it, but it's from a book called Measuring Heaven, Pythagoras and His Influence by Juste Gagier. It's excellent review of all the ideas and mythology of following the Pythagorean tradition. We also see it in the 4 times 7-fold division of the lunar cycle, governing not only the tides, but countless circadian rhythms in plant, animal, and human kingdoms. The 28-day cycle is also operative in the lunar stations called the nakshatras in Vedic astrology. Also, a key governing principle in architectural design, city planning, in traditional Vedic culture. Each human incarnation, from conception to death, we're told, is governed by cycles of 7 years. It is not until the age of 7, for example, that Manas, the human soul, has taken hold of the child and made the individual a responsible agent. And in traditional cultures, each 7 years brings new initiations, new responsibilities, and rites of passage. 7 is also a key subdivision of planetary life. The 7 stages of evolution, called rounds and races, given by HPB in The Secret Doctrine, helps us to see the application of the double triangles in relation to the spiral. And as Marlon mentioned last week, the logarithmic spiral is associated with the pentagram, the golden ratio, and the Fibonacci series. The pentagram is also linked to the 10th sign of the zodiac, that of Capricorn or Makara, the dragon of wisdom, each year entered on or around December 21st. And of course, 10 is 5 doubled, like the fingers of the 2 hands. And the 10-fold division of the circle carries all the same golden ratios created by the 5-fold division. The 10 is also 7 plus 3, the 7 dhyanis with their origin in Mahat, plus the threefold logos. And it is, of course, the well-known Pythagorean decad and the Sephirothal tree, the 10-fold Adam Kadmon, or heavenly man, wrote HPB, representing all potentiality, earthly and divine, within every spiritual atom, she says, every monad involved in the evolutionary cycle. And this 10-fold potentiality is realized through a process of descent and ascent, involution and evolution. In the planetary cycle, involution involves a series of rounds, 1 through 4, in which consciousness traverses and assimilates the lower kingdoms, and matter differentiates, guided by the lunar dhyanis, towards individualized vestures. Each round or globe corresponds to one of the 7 dhyanis, to a principle of human nature, to a cosmic element, and to particular capacities of perception and activity on the corresponding plane. The 4th is the most material, that is, where the utmost differentiation of matter and consciousness is reached, and where the 4th principle of kama, or desire, enters full development. But most importantly, the 4th, our current round, marks the critical golden age turning point in the cycle of 7, where manas, the 5th principle, or faculty of self-conscious thought, intelligent awareness of choice and responsibility, is first lit up. And this is the descent, we're told, of the solar dhyanis, the true birth of thinking humanity within the planetary cycle, symbolized by Prometheus and the fire-bringing gods of many traditions. And one way this is described is as the churning ocean of immortality differentiating into its constituent drops. And in this childlike state of innocence, all the mysteries of nature, it is said, were common knowledge. We all knew the immortal divine in ourselves, in the seeming gods who walked the earth, and its diffusion throughout nature and through all of humanity. Because of this sacrificial descent, the upward arc of further progress becomes possible. No longer is the spiraling motion dependent upon the incessant evolution of external forms, but instead also requires transformations in consciousness through self-development efforts. And though we may have temporarily lost that innate purity and wisdom, Theosophy teaches the path can be recovered through 7 archetypal stages. The individuated solar monastic ray may self-consciously re-become the dhyani of which it is an emanation, eventually reuniting with the macrocosmic mind and the logoic heart. And in this manner, through this process, the many returns to the one, and all the elemental fields of the kingdoms below the human are thereby lifted and prepared for the next great cycle. So it's through the path, in fact, that the cycle of reascent is accomplished for humanity and for all the fields below, self-consciously completing the great cosmic cycle. And we have this quote from HPB: during the 3 rounds to come, humanity, like the globe on which it lives, will be ever tending to reassume its primeval form, that of a Dhyan Chohanic host. Man tends to become a god, then God, like every other atom in the universe. So just in the same way that each round is, or the rounds are divided into 7, so too, as we know, each round is composed of 7 great races and each composed of 7 sub-races. And as Elton pointed out this morning, the term race was used quite differently by HPB than in its modern meaning. In theosophical thought, it refers to particular conditions through which the whole of humanity is obliged to travel. Each great race is symbolized in the archaic teaching by a simple geometrical figure. The first race is associated with the Isle of the Blessed, an invisible but imperishable continent and dwelling place, it is said, of the immortals, corresponding to Shambhala in the Buddhist tradition. It is symbolized by the point in the circle. The second race is the Hyperborean, meaning beyond the north wind, associated with the principle of Buddhi and the horizontal line within the circle. And HPB comments at one point in the SD that the history of these 2 races are of such an ethereal nature that little can be told of them that would make sense to us. The third race, however, which is the Lemurian, at the midpoint of which the evolving human form transitions from a prototypical astral form into the condition of physical matter that we're familiar with. And in the 4th round, the third race development includes the separation of the sexes into male and female, and the awakening of manas that we've already mentioned briefly. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th races involve a complex drama to which much of the 2nd volume of the SD is dedicated. And the emergence of the 4th race, which is the Atlantean, corresponds in Greek mythology with the reign of Zeus Poseidon. And here it is said that the fall of humanity into matter is complete, and the human vesture has reached the acme of physical evolution. However, though human beings are 7-fold, as symbolized by the cross associated with the 4th race, that the circle has disappeared, right? And this apparently is because the development of reason and sensation on the lower planes has eclipsed our higher spiritual capacities. And perhaps also because the 4th race Atlantean was blinded by its misuse of the newly awakened psychic capacities. And it is that within us which identifies with and worships the vesture of incarnation rather than the immortal spirit of unity. HPB explained that even in exoteric Buddhism, that this This teaching regarding the race evolution is symbolized by the 11 heads of Avalokiteshvara, the demonic head of the fourth tier, at one level symbolizing the Atlantean. And it is the demon of animalistic appetites, of egotism, selfishness, and self-interest, which he describes as giving birth to dogmatism, sectarianism, division, and discord, all of which further increases our blindness and materialism, our inhumanity to one another and to nature, and our propensity towards self-destruction. And though we're currently in the fifth subrace of the fifth root race, which, following the analogy here, would be the Buddha just above the demon there, in which the development of the thinking principle should be freeing itself from the darkness of ignorance and lower desires through a purified fourth principle that is guided by altruism, by bodhicitta and the vow of Kuan Yin. Yet the Atlantean influence is still heavily with us, much more so than is strictly necessary as required by evolution. And we were just noticing this morning that in this illustration, the crown of the fourth race is covering the mouth of the Buddha head associated with the fifth race there, suggesting that it's still preventing the realization or the full emergence of the fifth race. Spirituality is on its ascending arc, and the animal or physical impedes it from steadily progressing on the path of its evolution. The selfishness of the personality has so strongly infected the real inner man with its lethal virus that the upward attraction has lost all its power on the thinking, reasonable man. In sober truth, vice and wickedness are an abnormal, unnatural manifestation at this period of our human evolution. At least they ought to be so. The fact that mankind was never more selfish and vicious than it is now, civilized nations having succeeded in making of the first an ethical characteristic, of the second an art, is an additional proof of the exceptional nature of the phenomenon. And all of this is further compounded, we're told, by Kali Yuga, an age black with horrors, where everything is inverted, where adharma is made to look like dharma, where kings and rulers are addicted to falsehood and wickedness, fake news is given as truth, where wealth is the object of devotion and taken as a sign of wisdom, and where physical passion is often the sole bond between the sexes. And it was on behalf of rescuing and reigniting our innate sense of human solidarity and world community, to reawaken the voice of conscience, the soul memories, intuitions, and sense of timeless dignity and divine dharma in all human souls, that the Theosophical movement continues to attempt to insert this golden age teaching into and within the predominant darkness. Each new race, wrote HPB, will bring with it entirely new conditions of mind and heart, more refined and ethereal vestures of incarnation, and entirely renovated modes of harmonic civilization. The seventh race, she says, will be one of glorious adepts, of Buddhas and Christs, true sons of God, born of immaculate parents. In Theosophical teaching, the zodiacal clock mirrors the same archetypal pattern of descent and ascent, of involution and evolution already discussed. If one includes the interior angles where the interlaced triangles meet, or copies and rotates the symbol 30 degrees, the six-pointed star, of course, can also be seen as a reference to the 12 signs of the zodiac. The whole of antiquity, wrote HPB, believed with good reason that humanity and its races are all intimately connected with the planets, their geometric relationships, and their ever-shifting position in the zodiac. And this knowledge and the accurately correct divisions and meanings associated with each cycle formed, she says, part and parcel of the mysteries, where these sacred sciences were taught to disciples who had met the preliminary preconditions and successively passed the trials. The true Chela, she wrote, is one living only on behalf of humanity as a whole, is one who aids the forward motion of the great karmic wheel by forcing forward in his or her own nature the cycles of moral purification, of universal love and devotion, leading towards pellucid awakenings and enlightenment that will be possible for humanity as a whole over the coming races and rounds. From the SD, volume 1, 314, the cycle of initiation was a reproduction in miniature of that great series of cosmic changes to which astronomers have given the name of tropical or sidereal year. Just as at the close of the cycle of the sidereal year, the heavenly bodies return to the same relative positions as they occupied at its outset, so at the close of the cycle of initiation, the inner man has regained the pristine state of divine purity and knowledge from which he set out on his cycle of terrestrial incarnation. But this is not a teaching solely for the far distant future, nor only for scholars and astrologers. This division of the sidereal year or sidereal cycle into 12 also helps us to see the relationship of the Manvantaric cycle, not only to the yearly cycle of solstices and equinoxes, but to each day. Hermes advises the practitioner wishing to better attune the individuated mind to the rhythms of nature in the cosmic mind and to the spiritual experiences of deep sleep, to inculcate a rhythm of logoic mental breathing. And this means working with yearly, weekly, and daily natural cycles. The four nodal points of the yearly cycle correspond to the four-fold division of the day. Each of the sandhyas, the sunrise and sunset, are said to be the most efficacious periods for meditation, for a mental respite via return to the true center of selfhood, the AUM in the hearts of all beings, and to our unconditional commitment to serve. And to these should be added, is recommended, a third point near the midpoint of the day. The mental exhalation is a re-engaging with the external demands of time-bound dharmas, with the aim of applying in some small way the truths that are touched in union with the timeless. And in this manner, the 3 points in waking consciousness will prepare the conscious mind for retention of that which naturally occurs at the fourth point, the midnight hour, where, as the voice of the silence states, the Buddha is born. So that completes our presentation.
So does anyone have any questions for Kirk after this?
Well, just briefly, thank you, Kirk, for a beautiful mathematical presentation on eternity and time. I just have a brief question about time and consciousness. If a consciousness were capable of universality, say on the level of Brahman or someone in the seventh race in the seventh round, could we communicate immediately with a being in which would now be possibly 15 billion light years on a quasar? Would consciousness, does it quite transcend the speed of light? Because it seems that consciousness always has been and always will be in some form. It is God, and it is beyond time. And I wonder if you could address that issue.
Well, if I understood the question, it's, does consciousness transcend the speed of light, which apparently it does. And I think you answered that question. And does it transcend what we think of as being distant in time and space? And I think that ultimately, yes, that would have to be true. If the three fundamentals, or rather the three hypostases elaborated in the Secret Doctrine are true of, our innate capacities of consciousness, whether we could, I think the issue for all of us perhaps is what can be retained by the conscious mind, because at any given time, all of these higher influences are present. The Buddha nature is ever present. And we do enter these deeper states of consciousness and awareness of union with the all in states of deep dreamless sleep. But the question is, what can the conscious mind retain? And so the long upward path is one in which there's a progressive, by stages, purification of the heart and mind. And through the attempt to enact through Dharma, through one's daily life, through the daily round, the higher truths, the higher moral and mental spiritual truths, to whatever extent one can. So as the paramitas is another way to express that. But of course, the paramitas also include this training of consciousness. So it's a sevenfold training of all the vestures and all the capacities of human nature, with the aim of eventually, yes, reaching that condition in which whatever is needed to serve humanity in a given situation can be accessed. And I think that's the other part of the question, right? It's not only what the self-conscious mind can retain, but what can it use in order to aid the forward motion of the wheel, so to speak, and whatever being happens to be in front of one, but also dissolving that sense of separateness, so that the being in front of one is seen as also being, a particular instance, really, of the larger family of man. And so by serving one serves all. So that's a very, far-reaching answer to a very difficult question, avoiding the central question.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Marlon, can you ask us a succinct question?
I hope so. Like everyone else, Kirk, thank you so very much. This is just so awe-inspiring and profound, if I may say. But my question is, in the Gita, Krishna warns against being subject to desire, and because you'll be reborn again. And the intimation is that we don't want to be reborn again. And yet, what we're talking about here is great souls being reborn again. And so in my own life, there was an issue where, what does that mean? Okay, don't desire anything, whatever. And also perhaps reflected in the falsely, in my opinion, understood Christian idea that, you'll make it into heaven and live there for eternity. And so there's something in between here. When Pythagoras talks about, the triangle, I'm sorry, and the manifestation into dimensionality. There's a wonderful life there. It's a beautiful life. And so I'm trying to figure out the Dalai Lama, other magnificent teachers. This transition seems to be a separate, an ascent into something more beautiful, more profound, more necessarily shared with humanity, to make life really beautiful and good. Could you speak, I think you did to Judy's question, but I didn't fully understand it all. So could you speak to that and perhaps the nature of the reincarnating monad? What is that like?
Well, it's, there was, I detected at least 10 questions there, Marlon, but thank you. Thank you. And I'll just, obviously I don't know, I don't have the answer, but I could just offer a few reflections. And I keyed in on one particular one, which was the first question you asked having to do with desire. So this is, and because we're in the fourth round, this appears to be one of the key issues that we're grappling with and need to solve. And that is the transformation of personal desire into impersonal love and universal compassion. And that the idea is, yes, that is innate in us, but there's a whole lot that's getting in the way of it manifesting through us. Instead, we've inverted it. We've turned it into tanha, this grasping and holding on to desire for life, desire for incarnation. But one of the keys that, I'll say two keys. One is the whole idea of the teaching regarding Fohat, which is the universal spiritual will, and also that you could say divine energy connected with the great breath, by which that which brings the zero into one, two, and the two into three. It's that which brings the whole cosmos into being. And it's pure beneficence, as HPB gives it in the Theosophical Glossary and connected with Kamadeva. This universal, that is actually our true nature. That's what brought us into incarnation. So it is a reattunement back to what we truly are. But that the key that Judge gives in the Ocean of Theosophy is that even a Buddha and a Christ had to take a vow at some point to serve humanity or some part of it, and to keep that desire alive in their hearts through many incarnations. So it's that vow to serve, apparently, which will in time transform the lower desires into that higher desire, and which you're pointing out also is, then it becomes true joy. Then it's Sat Chitananda. Then participation in the cycle of manifestation is, that's what's said about the Bodhisattva. It's no labor. Endless labor is no labor, because there is no self and other. One is simply an agent in this great, cosmic process, apparently, in which that whole distinction between heaven and hell, samsara and nirvana, has been transcended. And that's apparently, that's a higher form of nirvana, actually. In certain sutras, you find that, where the lower forms still are caught in that dichotomy between samsara and nirvana, but the higher forms of nirvana is union with it all, and this endless and boundless love by which one participates. So anyway, just a few thoughts there.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much.